government says replacing the Resource Management Act with a new planning system will make it far easier to build homes, roads and other key infrastructure across New Zealand. Councils are losing power, landowners are gaining new rights and business groups are hailing it as a once-in-a-generation reset. But there are also warnings it could weaken environmental protections and shift costs onto ratepayers. Joining us live from Wellington is the Minister who has led this reform, Chris Bishop. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Look, reducing the number of consents required sounds fantastic, but everyone's in favour of that until it's their neighbour doing something that they don't want. So is the risk here that you're going to have the NIMBYs up in arms?
Look, I think we've got the balance about right. The RMA at the moment regulates so many aspects of things that it just shouldn't regulate, right? So you need permission to do all sorts of things to your own property. Now, when you're having an impact on somebody else, fair enough. I can't set up an industrial effluent discharge factory on my property, for example, but when you've got councils getting involved in things like which way your TV faces, the layout of your living room, what you paint your front door, which way your front door faces, where the planter boxes are on your driveway, all that sort of stuff. Those are all real life examples, by the way. And you have to go get consent for that and argue with the council for, in some cases, weeks, months, at vast expense. People get rightly pretty frustrated by that. So it's about removing some of that friction in the system and reducing red tape.
Yeah, absolutely. What have the councils had to say about the fact that, I guess, they're being removed from some of these processes?
Well, to be honest, there's enormous frustration inside local government at the way the RMA works now as well. And I think there's broad consensus that we've just built up the system that's basically almost collapsing under its own weight. For example, we require consent to do almost anything, even on your own property when you're not affecting other people. It's too hard to get consent for major infrastructure projects, for example, for the energy, the roads, the rail, the hospitals and schools we need to build. I mean, some of these, even public sector projects, hospitals, schools, tied up in consenting processes for months, years at a time. I mean, it should not take 6 to 8 years to consent a wind farm in New Zealand. It should not take 10 years to get an extension to a port, for example. These are the type of real-life examples that we're trying to deal with the RMA, and they've unfortunately made New Zealand a far less prosperous place than it otherwise can and should be.
You've talked about this ending the culture of no, but I wondered, given that the RMA and that culture of no has resulted in some dumb decisions like building on land where we grow food and building on land that is flood prone, are we going to see less of that under these reforms? Well,
in relation to flood-prone land, the new system will actually be a lot better. That's one of the failures of the RMA. So the new system will have a very clear requirement for councils to map properly for natural hazards, and we're going to be making quite a big investment in the data side of that as well to make sure that we can do that properly, and councils can mark out the areas through 30-year spatial plans for areas that are off limits because they are flood risks or areas of natural hazards, for example. That's one of the failures of the RMA, so we've done quite a lot of time and thinking about that. So I'm really proud of that. And spatial planning more generally is going to be a really key component of the system. I mean, looking out over 30 years and working out where we can grow and where we don't grow, where the infrastructure corridors are going to be, that is going to lower the future costs of infrastructure, and it's going to make our cities a lot more flexible and a lot more sensible when it comes to planning.
Are you going to take the opposition parties on the journey on this one? Because one of the things I think everyone is sick of is that every government for decades has talked about this, and sometimes new legislation comes in and then gets tossed out by the next government and they bring in their own idea of what the right thing is to do. So is there room for working together and making some concessions so that everyone's on board with this?
Yes, there is. We've had a number of meetings with Labor and the Greens already, probably 3 or 4 meetings, and their caucus, the Labor caucus, was briefed on the proposals a week or so ago, and obviously the bills have now introduced to Parliament, and we'll see which way they vote next week when they have their first reading. But there's been quite a lot of engagement with both Labor and the Greens at a ministerial level by me, but also at an official level as well. And it's over to them for them to say how they regard it. But it would be fair to say that I'm really keen to try and build some consensus here, and I really welcome Chris Hipkins' comments yesterday that we can't have this constant chopping and changing and up and down and yay or nay. This is a once-in-a-generation reform. I meant that when I said it. We want to do this once. We want to do it properly. We want to get broad buy-in from across the community. Really heartening to see the stakeholders yesterday from all parts of the New Zealand economy, basically saying this is a pretty good start. That'll be, I think, a fair summary of the feedback. And now it's about sending it to committee, getting some further consensus, making some changes, because no bill's perfect on introduction. And there is that room for compromise. If it means that we can get a stable set of policy settings that advances New Zealand's prosperity, then we're up for that. And I think all political parties would be up for it as well.
Huge piece of work, huge day for you yesterday, so that's done, tick. Can you now focus on a campaign to be the next leader of the National Party?
I've still got a lot of work to do, to be honest, this side of Christmas. I've got a number of other things in Parliament and ministerial things to do. And then, of course, we're going to take a couple of weeks off over Christmas, spend some time with the family, and then we'll be back into it sort of early to mid-January and get straight back into it. We've got a big year next year, the campaign to run, obviously, for re-election as well. So, lots happening, but, I like being busy. It's all good.
Well, did you see the latest poll numbers last night, that 31% of voters thought that there's another national MP better suited to the role of Prime Minister, and 13% of those thought you? That's flattering, isn't it?
I only half saw the story, to be honest. I was having drinks with my some of the officials and in my office just to say thanks for all the hard work they've put in the hard yards over the last few months in particular. So I only half saw the story, but there's been no doubt a lot of media in the last 24 hours I need to catch up on. But at the moment, to be honest, it's just head down, bum up on the planning changes, which are really important for the country.
But you harbour leadership aspirations?
No, I harbour aspirations to be the best RMA reform minister this country's ever had, and hopefully it will be the first and last RMA reform minister, because we're getting rid of the RMA. So I want to just be the best housing, transport and infrastructure minister that I can. That's the job I've been given, and that's the job I'm trying to do to the best of my ability. Yeah,
here's hoping that we can actually stop talking about the RMA at all and get on with getting some things done. Thank you so much for your time this morning. That is Chris Bishop, who of course has led that RMA reform we learnt about yesterday.